Claremont, California, a quiet, affluent city. The year is 1976. Ralph and Constance Rossum welcome their first child, Kristin. Kristin is a beautiful baby with blonde hair and bright blue eyes. The Rossums dote on her, providing a life of privilege. Ballet and piano lessons, summer camps. Kristin excels in everything. She dreams of becoming a prima ballerina, and her parents share her ambitions. Life seems idyllic for the Rossum family. But beneath the surface, darkness lurks. A storm is brewing. The perfect life they've built is about to crumble. The Rossums are unaware of the challenges ahead. Kristin's journey is just beginning. Kristin continues to excel, winning awards and scholarships. The pressure mounts, and she pushes herself harder. She craves validation and applause, but the relentless pursuit of perfection takes its toll. A career-ending ankle injury shatters her dreams. Kristin is devastated, her identity gone. She turns to alcohol to numb the pain. The once promising ballerina is spiraling. Her life is about to take a very dark turn. The injury marks the beginning of a downward spiral. Kristin's future seems uncertain. The pain of her lost dreams is unbearable. She struggles to find a new path. The darkness begins to consume her. Kristin's life spirals out of control. Alcohol is no longer enough. She turns to drugs. Her addiction takes hold, and her parents are beside themselves. They try to help her with rehab and interventions, but nothing works. Kristin becomes withdrawn and secretive, stealing from her family. One fateful night, she attempts to take her own life. Her parents find her unconscious and rush her to the hospital. She survives, but the damage is done. Kristin's life is in ruins. Her future is uncertain. The once loving daughter is now a stranger. The Rossums are heartbroken. Kristin's struggle with addiction continues. The suicide attempt serves as a wake-up call. Kristin knows she needs to change and enters therapy. The road to recovery is long and arduous, but she's determined. Years pass and Kristin makes progress. She enrolls in college, studying toxicology. Kristin excels in her studies and graduates with honors. She finds a job at a prestigious research lab. Life is finally looking up, but the scars of addiction run deep. Kristin still struggles with cravings. She knows she's walking a tightrope. One wrong step could send her spiraling back. The journey to recovery is ongoing. Kristin finds solace in the lab. She meets Greg de Villers at a conference. He's charming and easy to talk to. They begin dating. Greg is smitten with Kristin. Kristin is hesitant, afraid to reveal her past. But Greg is persistent. He showers her with love. Kristin starts to believe in a happy ending. Kristin and Greg's relationship blossoms, and they move in together. Greg is patient and understanding, helping Kristin through rough patches. Kristin feels a sense of normalcy she's never experienced before. She loves Greg deeply, but is terrified of losing him. Kristin's past haunts her, and she keeps it hidden from Greg. The weight of her secret becomes unbearable. Kristin starts to withdraw from Greg, afraid of hurting him. She pushes him away, fearing he will leave her. The strain of her double life takes its toll. Kristin's behavior becomes erratic, and Greg is worried. He tries to understand what's wrong, but Kristin lashes out. The relationship begins to fracture under the pressure. Kristin's behavior becomes erratic, and Greg is worried. He tries to talk to her, but she pushes him away. One night, in a fit of despair, Kristin relapses. She takes a handful of pills and collapses. Greg rushes her to the hospital. She survives, but their relationship is broken. Kristin's journey to recovery is far from over. Kristin knew she had to leave San Francisco. She moved to San Diego, determined to start fresh. She found a small apartment near the ocean, seeking peace. Kristin immersed herself in her work as a toxicologist. She thrived under pressure, earning the respect of her colleagues. She avoided romantic entanglements, focusing on her career and recovery. The sound of the waves brought her a sense of calm. Kristin told herself this was a new beginning, a chance to rebuild her life and conquer her demons. But deep down, she was terrified of getting hurt again. The past still haunted her. Kristin's journey to recovery continued. One evening, at an office social event, Kristin met Dr. Michael Robertson. He was her supervisor, the chief medical examiner. Kristin found herself drawn to his confidence and intellect. Their relationship quickly escalated from professional to personal. Secret rendezvous in the lab turned into stolen weekends away. Kristin knew it was wrong, but couldn't resist the allure. Dr. Robertson encouraged Kristin's darker impulses. He fueled her addiction with stolen drugs from the evidence locker. The relationship was a dangerous game. Kristin was trapped in a whirlwind of passion and despair. The affair threatened to destroy everything she'd worked for. Kristin's struggle with addiction deepened. Kristin found herself trapped in a whirlwind of passion and despair. Dr. Robertson promised her the world, but his promises rang hollow. Whispers of their illicit relationship spread through the office. Kristin felt the walls closing in, terrified of losing everything. One night, after a heated argument, Kristin broke down. She confessed her deepest fear to Dr. Robertson. He offered her a dark and twisted pact to make it all go away. Kristin clung to his words, desperate for a way out. The pact would bind their fates together forever. Kristin's life was spiraling out of control. The relationship was a dangerous game. The consequences were dire. Kristin needed to get away, so she booked a trip to Tijuana. She wandered the bustling streets seeking anonymity. She found herself drawn to a small bar with mariachi music. Inside, she met Greg de Villers. They struck up a conversation, and Kristin slowly let her guard down. She told Greg about her work but avoided talking about her personal life. Greg's kindness put her at ease. They spent the next few days together exploring Tijuana. Kristin felt a connection she hadn't expected. Greg made her laugh and forget her troubles. For a brief time, she felt free, but the darkness still clung to her. Greg was instantly smitten with Kristin. They spent the next few days together exploring Tijuana. Kristin felt a connection she hadn't expected. Greg made her laugh and forget her troubles. When it was time for Kristin to return to San Diego, Greg walked her to her car. He took her hand and expressed his feelings. Kristin's heart skipped a beat. She had never felt this way about anyone before. But a part of her held back. The fear and guilt of her double life weighed on her. Kristin's journey to recovery continued. The future was uncertain. Kristin returned to San Diego, her mind racing. She couldn't stop thinking about Greg. She had promised to call him but hesitated. Greg was persistent, leaving messages and sending flowers. Kristin finally gave in and called Greg. They arranged to meet, but their first date was awkward. Kristin was withdrawn and distant. Greg sensed something was wrong but couldn't put his finger on it. The strain of her double life took its toll. Kristin's behavior became erratic. Greg grew increasingly suspicious. The relationship was on shaky ground. Despite her reservations, Kristin found herself falling for Greg. He was everything Michael wasn't: kind, gentle, and understanding. They began spending more time together, and Kristin felt a sense of normalcy. But her relationship with Michael continued in the shadows. The weight of her deception was starting to crush her. One evening, Greg surprised Kristin with a romantic dinner. As they sat down to eat, Greg proposed. Kristin was caught off guard, her heart pounding. She wanted to say yes, but was paralyzed by fear. The lie she was living threatened to destroy everything. Kristin's journey to recovery continued. The future was uncertain. Greg's proposal caught Kristin completely off guard. Her heart pounded and her mind raced. She stared at the ring, feeling a wave of nausea. She wanted to say yes, but was paralyzed by fear. The lie she was living hung over her like a dark cloud. Greg sensed something was wrong and asked if she loved him. Kristin wanted to confess everything but couldn't. The fear of losing him paralyzed her. She managed to deflect Greg's questions, blaming her hesitation on her past. Greg accepted her explanation, attributing her reluctance to lingering trauma. Kristin promised to think about his proposal. The strain of her double life continued to take its toll. Kristin managed to deflect Greg's questions, blaming her hesitation on her past. Greg accepted her explanation, attributing her reluctance to lingering trauma. She promised Greg she would think about his proposal. In truth, she was buying herself time. Life went on, at least outwardly. Kristin continued to excel at work, maintaining a facade of normalcy. She and Greg avoided any discussion of the proposal, but the strain of her double life was taking its toll. Sleepless nights and anxiety attacks plagued her. The constant fear of being found out loomed. Kristin was trapped in a web of her own making. The more she struggled, the tighter the web became. Despite her efforts, cracks began to appear in Kristin's facade. Greg grew increasingly suspicious of her late nights and evasive answers. One evening, he noticed her phone buzzing and picked it up. The text message displayed on the screen was brief but devastating. Greg's blood ran cold as he realized the truth. Rumors of Kristin's affair with Dr. Robertson had reached him. He had dismissed them as idle gossip. The phone slipped from Greg's grasp, shattering his world. The future he had envisioned with Kristin was in ruins. He felt a surge of anger and betrayal. The pain was overwhelming. Kristin's double life had finally caught up with her. The shower stopped, the silence amplifying the pounding in Greg's ears. Kristin emerged, a towel around her wet hair, and stopped dead in her tracks. The color drained from her face as she saw Greg, her cell phone at his feet. "Greg," she stammered, I can explain." But Greg didn't want to hear her excuses. He had seen the text message, the undeniable proof of her betrayal. "Explain what, Kristin?" Greg's voice was low, dangerous. "Explain that you've been lying to me?" Kristin's eyes welled up with tears. Greg laughed, a bitter, humorless sound. "It's called betrayal." Kristin, her carefully constructed world crumbling, desperately tried to salvage the situation. She denied the affair, claiming Michael was just a colleague, that the texts were innocent. But Greg had seen enough to know the truth, and her lies only fueled his anger. "Don't insult me by lying, Kristin," Greg spat. "I saw the messages. I know what's going on." Kristin sank onto the bed, trembling, her mind racing. She knew she couldn't lie her way out of this. "Greg, please," she begged, reaching out, but he recoiled. "Just listen to me." But Greg turned away, unable to bear the sight of her. "I don't want to hear any more of your lies, Kristin," he said coldly. Section 3. The Unthinkable. The days that followed were a blur of agonizing arguments, tearful pleas, and desperate attempts at reconciliation. Kristin swore she would end the affair, that Greg meant everything to her, but the damage was done. The trust had been irrevocably broken. Greg, haunted by images of Kristin and Michael, found himself unable to forgive. Then, just 2 days after Greg's discovery, the unthinkable happened. Greg was found dead in the apartment. The news sent shockwaves through their circle. Section 4. A single red rose. Investigators pieced together Greg's death, revealing a chilling narrative. An autopsy showed a lethal cocktail of drugs, pointing to Kristin's expertise. Kristin made suspicious purchases, including a single red rose. Greg's body was found with rose petals, resembling a romantic gesture. Evidence against Kristin mounted, painting her as a scorned woman. Kristin Rossum's case became a media sensation, a tale of love and betrayal. The weight of evidence against Kristin Rossum was overwhelming. Forensic experts testified that the drugs found in Greg's system were consistent with substances available to Kristin. Prosecutors argued Kristin poisoned Greg to silence him and salvage her relationship with Dr. Robertson. The jury, however, was unconvinced. They returned a guilty verdict, convicting Kristin Rossum of first-degree murder. Kristin showed no visible reaction as the judge sentenced her to life in prison without parole. The guilty verdict brought a sense of closure to Greg de Villers' family, but it did little to ease their pain, their grief forever intertwined with the haunting question of why. Why would Kristin, a woman they had welcomed into their family, a woman who had professed to love their son, take his life in such a cold and calculated manner? The case of Kristin Rossum, dubbed the toxic toxicologist by the media, captivated the nation, its themes of love, betrayal, and murder striking a chord with the public's fascination with true crime. But despite the extensive media coverage, the countless hours of investigation, and the guilty verdict that sealed Kristin's fate, some questions lingered, unanswered and perhaps unanswerable. Did Kristin, consumed by guilt and fear, act alone in taking Greg's life? Or was she, as some whispered, manipulated by the enigmatic Dr. Robertson, a man whose own role in the tragedy remained shrouded in mystery? Did Greg, his spirit broken by Kristin's infidelity, choose to end his own life, his death a tragic suicide disguised as a calculated murder? Or was he, as the prosecution successfully argued, the victim of a cunning and ruthless woman who saw his death as the only way to escape the consequences of her actions? In the years since the trial, Kristin Rossum has faded from public view, her life sentence a stark contrast to the bright future she once seemed destined for. She remains incarcerated in a California state prison, her story a chilling reminder that behind the facade of normalcy, Even the most promising lives can harbor dark secrets and deadly intentions. The case of Kristin Rossum continues to fascinate and disturb, its themes resonating with a culture obsessed with true crime and the often blurred lines between love, obsession, and violence. It serves as a cautionary tale, a stark reminder that unchecked ambition, toxic relationships, and the allure of forbidden desires can lead to a devastating downfall. The image of the single red rose, a symbol of love twisted into a macabre memento mori, lingers in the minds of those who followed the case, a haunting reminder of the fragility of life and the devastating consequences of unchecked darkness. The case of Kristin Rossum is more than just a tragic love story gone wrong. It's a stark reminder of the destructive power of addiction, the allure of forbidden desires, and the devastating consequences of choices made in the shadows of secrecy and deceit. Kristin Rossum's story is ultimately a tragedy, a life of promise derailed by addiction and toxic relationships. The line between victim and perpetrator is thin. Reflecting on Kristin Rossum, we ponder the complexities of the human heart and the allure of the forbidden. Her story is a cautionary tale showing how love can lead to despair.